So, I heard you're looking for a go-to source for entertainment.
Wait for it.
Gaming?
Wait for it.
Anime?
Plus Ultra!
Mr. Eric Almighty and Phil the Filipino? Yeah, they've got you covered. And all you gotta do is... wait for it. This is the Wait For It podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wait For It podcast. I am your co-host, Phil Smith, aka Phil the Filipino. And joining me as always is your other co-host, Mr. Eric Almighty. And Eric, we are here with the February edition of the Game Room, Where It Happens. And typically we use this series to talk about games from our early years, when we really got into gaming, when we first got into gaming, and we reminisce on different titles. But every once in a while, a game comes around that simply cannot be ignored, and that is the case for the February edition of the Game Room. And super excited to be talking about Palworld. And surface level, this looks like a pretty simplistic game. It's pretty obvious where they drew a lot of inspiration from, which we will definitely get into. But Eric, while we may not bring that much new in terms of the conversation about this game, people everywhere are talking about it, but most importantly, they're playing it.
That's absolutely the biggest thing from this game that I don't think people expected when they heard Pokemon with guns when it first was announced. And, it kind of felt like a meme game, like people would have fun with it. And in a way, it's kind of happened. Players have dropped off a little bit. Some would argue a lot. But for a game that's in early testing, for us to have as much fun as we've had with it, and really only getting the chance to play it because we have the best deal in gaming in Xbox Game Pass, again, it's kind of crazy to look at this and say, we're doing an episode on Palworld for this series. And that's not the only game this year that we're going to be covering. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But Palworld, Phil, I did not see it coming. I didn't think we would be playing this at all. And the fact that we're talking about it is an accomplishment in itself.
Well, remember when we did the draft with your friendly neighborhood gamers? Shout out to them. We did the Fantasy Critic draft. And we kept saying, I really don't know what we're going to be playing this year. There, obviously we've already had 2 flops already: Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, Skull and Bowls. What is that? What is Skull and Balls? Skull and Bones.
Same game.
Same game. Maybe a very different game that might be even better, actually. But when you're talking about AAA gaming, there wasn't that title that we were like, oh man, we can't wait, like Spider-Man. Harry Potter, Eric's Game of the Year. There just wasn't a title like that that had presented itself. And, that's what makes gaming so great, is that titles will come along that will surprise you, that come out of nowhere. And that's very much the case with this year's game, as well as next month's game. Spoiler alert, it's going to be Helldivers 2. But, these are games that just come out in the left field, and we find ourselves enjoying very, very much. So if you are also interested in seeing what other games we have talked about on this series, make sure you stick around to the very end. Let you know where you can find the rest of our content, as well as our social media pages. But Eric, let's go ahead and jump right into this here. If you are somehow unfamiliar with Palworld, it is a action-adventure survival monster taming game created and published by Japanese developer Pocket Pair. The game is set in an open world populated with animal-like creatures called pals, wink, which players can battle and capture to use for base building, traversal, and combat. Players may also assign the pals to bases where they will automatically complete tasks for the players. Palworld can be enjoyed either solo or online with up to 32 players on one server. It is currently available, as Eric mentioned, through Xbox Game Pass or on PC through Steam, I believe. I'm not sure if it's on the Epic Game Store, but like you said, Eric, Pokemon with guns was the essential made-up tagline amongst the community, because surface level, that's basically what it is and what it looks like. Now, as this episode progresses, we'll definitely talk about how it's definitely much deeper than that. And I think that's one of the reasons it's been able to hold a higher player count through the month of February, as we were recording this here mid-February. So Eric, what was it about, this game? Because again, you never played, because the game that I have most directly compared this to is Ark. And that's not a journey that you took with me back in, I think it was 2017 when I was playing it with a couple of friends. It just didn't seem like something you were interested in. So what was it about Palworld that made you say, you know what? Yeah, I'll give this a shot.
I think anytime you can get lost in a world in a game, it's helpful. And it immediately starts off and it's interesting because there's so much of the world to explore. I think one of the most underestimated or underrated things in gaming is the horizon, right? Whenever you can see in the horizon, see in the distance that mountaintop that you can travel to, or that beachhead that you can explore, like there's so much that can be done in those games, those open world games. And from the beginning, you feel that here. The exciting element was all the extra stuff. So it wasn't just an exploration game, but you also were able to craft, you were able to fight, you were able to do all these things. And on top of that, you got to do it with people. And I think that, Phil, if this was just a single player experience, it might be a little less interesting. But the option to play, and I know on Xbox the servers are a little bit more limited. I think they're working to update that, or it has been updated. But again, just that option being available is great because we didn't get to play a lot together. I think we played more solo than we have together. But the times we did play together, I felt like that maximized the amount of fun I was having.
Yeah, and listen, I don't want this conversation to just devolve into, man, I wish Pokemon would. I don't want that to happen. But it is inevitably, the comparisons are going to happen because what a lot of people are hoping now, first off, a lot of Pokemon fans got mad about this. Like, Game Freak, why haven't you stepped in? Why haven't you sued, Pocket Pair? What's going on? First off, this isn't the first Pokemon clone, okay? These games come along all the time. I think Temtem was the last one that came around a couple of years ago, and everyone was like, oh, this is the Pokemon killer, and this has existed for the longest time. And Pokemon itself is not an original idea. Sorry to spoil or burst your bubble, Pokemon fans, but that's not what is happening here. And, there's always going to be a market for throwing in cute and cool and fun looking animals into a game, wanting to capture them and collect them. That is collecting, I think, is like this innate what's the word, like it's this innate feeling that we all have from a young age, whether it be Pokemon cards, baseball cards, Transformers, toys, whatever it may be. Like, we have that innate, like, just need and want to collect something. So anytime that happens, people are going to be drawn to it. And then you add in the fact that you can give a tiny little squirrel a machine gun. Come on. Like, what do you mean? How am I not going to play that game? And, obviously the art comparisons, Eric, come to the part you were talking about, like the base building, the crafting, things like that. And the crafting, we'll talk about that a little bit later as far as some of our gripes could use a lot of work. But I think as far as what they put out, and this is what developers had said they wanted to do, they wanted to put out a game that people would have fun with and enjoy. And that's what's happened. When you talk about the things such as AI generated art and theft and all that kind of stuff, there are people that are more qualified to talk about that than us. Did some of that happen? Possibly, but we are not at liberty to talk about that just because we're not as well versed in it as I'm sure other people are. All it comes down to is, like you said, Eric, it's got a very fun gameplay loop. It encourages the exploration, which has been a whole lot of fun. I've done nothing but like just wanting to find a faster like flying pal so I can get around the map easier and find more fast travel points so I can go back and forth, find new pals and build new things. And that's what's worked about it. So, while there are some gripes that we're going to talk about a little bit later, they nailed the most basic part down, and that's why it's been so successful.
And that basic part, I think, is what people have criticized Pokemon and the games that have been coming out for not doing or being creative with at all. Again, it's a very simple gameplay loop, but Phil, it does have a lot to offer. I do think at some point that gameplay loop can definitely be a problem. And we'll probably link it in the show notes, but our friends at Your Friendly Neighborhood Gamers did a episode on YouTube talking about the guide to survival for Palworld. And they talked about just the fact that, fell off the game just because that gameplay loop is so repetitive. You're essentially building bases, capturing pals, building bases, capturing pals. It is the same gameplay loop. But I just think, again, I still have so much I want to accomplish. I haven't gotten to the point where I can give a squirrel a gun. I haven't unlocked that yet as of the time of this recording. And a lot of times when I get to these recordings, Phil, I end up trying to finish the game, but sometimes it doesn't happen. Palworld, I fully expect to spend more time in throughout the rest of this year just to kind of continue to scratch that itch of what did I not explore? What have I not gotten yet? And I think if the game adds to what the shortcomings are, or they fix those shortcomings and they add to the experience, I think they've got a great game on their hands. And it's kind of crazy, Phil, because 2024 started off with two complete ends of the spectrum. We got Suicide Squad and Skull and Bones. And then we got two games that we didn't expect to be playing that we're doing episodes on the podcast, which is Palworld, and next month is going to be Helldivers 2. And that's kind of crazy just to see the ends of the spectrum, not only from our gaming experience, but how the community has received those games.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, like, everything that I've seen from Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League has been like, yeah, there looks like there are probably some crazy moments, but they all seem manufactured. Same thing with Skull and Bones. It's very cutscene based. Whereas things that happen in Palworld, and especially the things that happen in Helldivers 2, they're all organic. Like all these crazy clips that you see online from both games, that's the kind of thing that makes you want to jump into it. That's literally the first clip I saw. I sent it to the group and I was like, yo, we need to probably check out this, talking about Helldivers 2. And then, the trailer for Palworld as well, something I was like, hey, felt you, me, my sister, Game Pass owners, people that swore they would never get Game Pass, Jordan, are playing Palworld because of how interesting that it looked. So it's bringing people in that, again, I think do have that itch for Game Freak and Nintendo to upgrade Pokemon, because like you said, I mean, they've been putting out the same game for all these years. People are terrified about the Black and White remakes that are about to come out, or they haven't been announced yet, but they're coming, and people are worried about that. So eventually, when you put out projects like a Pokemon Arceus, so it's supposed to be like this next level or next gen Pokemon game, and it ends up being terrible, people are going to migrate somewhere else and look for it elsewhere. And this goes to show that if even they put in like a little bit more effort, then the numbers are going to be there. Like, I will pick up my Nintendo Switch, or I will buy the Switch 2 to play a truly next gen Pokemon game. I'll pay for it. I will do it. But until then, I will find that elsewhere, and I'll give an Electabuzz a Gatling gun and have a great time. So that's where we're at right now. So, I don't think it's as simple as I want a Pokemon game, so I'm just going to play something that's similar, because I think there are gameplay elements here that are very, very solid. But with the good, Eric, has come the bad or the difficult. And, I do want to kind of transition to that and talk about some of our experiences, because I know you, playing it solo, especially recently, have had a couple of those issues.
Yeah, I definitely think, I don't know that they're minor gripes, but there are things when it comes to crafting, I feel like a lot of things could be simpler, a little bit smoother, a little bit more refined. And again, this game is in early beta testing. Like, this is not a completed game. That was very, very clear from the get-go. But I just think that this game does need to fix some things to keep us going, right? We talk about that gameplay loop. I do think the faster, or not the faster, I do think the more you get into it, the more you advance, things should go a little bit quicker. And I don't mean upping your attributes for work speed. What I mean is, I should be able to assign pals to do tasks a little bit easier than you can now, and them not drop off in the middle of it, and then I have to pick it up to get something that I want. If I need nails being created on a workbench, that should be a pretty simple task. There are also things where the game is reliant on certain elements, and Phil, you've mentioned this, or if you don't set up a base by somewhere with a lot of ore that essentially you end up mining, you're not going to be able to burn it for the material you need for a lot of the things that you need to build. So it's just kind of like, it doesn't help with the gameplay loop if it's simply crafting catch catch pals, do it over and over. It doesn't help when those things are challenging and it makes you do them. A little bit more of an automative feature to some of these things would go a long way for me to actually enjoy the exploration, which is ultimately what I think got people hooked on it in the first place and is what I'm hoping will keep me invested throughout the gameplay.
Yeah, crafting has definitely been one of those hot button issues for players. And again, this is also bringing in a player base that is not familiar with a Ark, with a Rust, with a, survival type of game. And that's understandable. And granted, you can adjust the settings however you want, which is great. Eric, I actually ended up turning off the feature where you drop all your items. I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. I know it's part of the survival experience, but no, I don't want to be stressed out in the middle of a boss fight, even though I understand it's part of the core gameplay loop that they intended. But no, I turned it off. If I'm able to turn it off, I'm going to take advantage of that. But yeah, you're bringing in players that aren't used to playing this type of game, and there are going to be some frustrations. One of the biggest complaints is like assigning a pal to a task where you have to pick them up and then throw them at it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'll tell you, it's probably 40% of the time works, 60% of the time does not. So again, these are all things that can be worked on as as the game progresses, which I fully expect them to do. One of the other things too that I really enjoyed about, because a game not similar, but like a gameplay loop in Lego Fortnite came out very recently as well. That's very similar to this, but in Lego Fortnite, you can give somebody that you've invited to your guild or your village or whatever a key to enter the game whenever they want. So you don't have to be, in the game for them to enter it. And Palworld, as far as, Xbox goes, I think it's different on PC. But if I want to, if Eric wants to go into our world that we share and do some crafting, just do some loot grinding and all that kind of stuff, I have to be in there with him. So those are all things that they are going to add eventually. But it is like just quality of life stuff that I think is preventing it from people sticking around, like Dylan mentioned, for a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I think the weakest part of this game, Phil, is definitely the combat. That's definitely a big issue.
AI bad AI, not good.
Very bad, yeah. And I think, again, I'm just more keen on letting my pals do the work, but I'm essentially watching them fight from a distance. So when it comes to combat, like, I'm not excited to jump into combat. Not to mention, you said bad AI. Yeah, the AI characters, the human characters are bad. Like, when we get into raids and they just kind of show up and do nothing and just show up to be killed, essentially. Or sometimes there will be one that is stuck. So most of the raid will come and then you have to go find that last person. It's little stuff like that. Because
I think you'll agree the raids are a cool idea. That's a neat idea. But yeah, it just doesn't work.
And again, it's in early beta testing, so I do give it some grace for sure. But you got to call a spade a spade.
Yeah, and as far as other things that they are working on, I have the roadmap up here that they want to add eventually. I'm gonna pull this up here. Yeah, PvP, raid bosses such as end game content, Pal Arena, which is PvP for pals. That will really make it like Pokemon, of course. Stream, Xbox crossplay, various Xbox feature improvements, server transfers and migrations, improvements to the building system, as well as new islands, pals, bosses, and technologies. So, all things that we're definitely excited for. These things just take time. And with a developer that seems to be like relatively new, this is like a successful Day Before. Remember Day Before had this like tiny ass little team and it had all these lofty expectations, but they were like, oh, no, we're just going to put out a game that I think people are really going to enjoy. And we might be a small team, but people, it's going to be fun and real. And it's going to be an actual game, unlike things we saw in 2023.
110%. Yeah, it's the complete opposite. And again, I mentioned it earlier. I think just the fact that it's so community driven is such a great thing. I think most companies, we're going to mention this with Helldivers when we do that episode. We've only played that game for 2 days in Helldivers, and we're already putting it in the same conversation that I'm saying with Palworlds. Palworlds has been out for like a month, And these two games off the bat, this little bit of time that we've spent with it as a community, we all know this is what gaming could be and should be in a lot of senses, even with the flaws. So it just kind of comes down to the fact that I hope that a lot of these companies, not just Nintendo, wake up and realize you don't have to microtransaction us to death. Everything can be fun. You can make a good game with a little bit of heart put into it, and the community will react appropriately. Don't nickel and dime us.
Yeah, again, like I said, it's like we're a very simple bunch. Like, just give us something that's enjoyable. Don't be sneaky in what you're trying to accomplish, and be forthcoming. And all that has worked out very well. We talk about the popularity of this game, and at its peak, Eric, as far as the Steam charts, it was 2.1 million players at one point. Now that has dropped obviously drastically, as these things do. You find your core audience, and that's what happens. But as of playing just a few minutes ago, 250,000 players playing on Steam alone, and that doesn't I don't believe that counts the people that are playing on Xbox. So it has struck a chord with many people, including ourselves. And I think we're going to continue playing this game. We certainly have to jump back into it as far as our world. But again, I think once they are able to allow us to jump into the world without the main person being there, that's going to work wonders, for a lot of things. And as they add more islands, more pals, all that kind of stuff, I think the trajectory for this game can only go up, barring some kind of disaster, which hopefully does not happen. But Eric, anything else you want to mention when it comes to Palworld? A very straightforward episode, and hopefully it gets to the right ears in terms of the people over there making these games, and also people making games in general. Like you said, just a call to action. This is what we want. This is what works for us.
Yeah, no. I think we've kind of covered it again. We mentioned it, I believe, at the top. For transparency, this is our third attempt recording this episode, so maybe we didn't say it. But in case that's the case, this is nothing new. What we're saying, you've heard it in the reviews leading up to this. We just wanted to give our own personal opinions as two more people in this growing community that have enjoyed a game like Palworlds. Despite its flaws, despite some of the controversy, it was still a hell of a time. And that's why we ended up, Phil. I honestly think, not to keep bringing up Helldivers, but it is what we're actively playing right now. I don't know that we would have taken a chance on Helldivers had we not taken the chance on Palworld. At the very least, I think it helped make us make the jump. And I think it's going to help us make the jump to more games that are getting a lot of good, steam behind it. And we weren't really planning on playing, or they weren't on our radar. You mentioned the Fantasy Critic draft and the fact that there was nothing on our radar to play this year. And here we are. 2 of our episodes already in the first quarter of this year are going to be games that came out this year. I think that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and also just to talk about those Xbox players, Palworld was the third biggest Game Pass launch ever as far as day one players. So this was something that a lot of people were interested in. I think it also helps that Microsoft does not have a Pokemon style game really that's at the forefront on its consoles. So that certainly played a big part in it as well. So yeah, I think that anytime that we find games that we will genuinely stick with for a while that do take us away from the Fortnites, that's always a good thing. Although we always do find our way back to it. It's like I would say it's a bad relationship, but Fortnite has treated us well. I think it's a good, solid, stable relationship. But you know what? We want to see what else is out there. And so far this year, we've found a couple of suitors that have taken us elsewhere, and we haven't been so faithful. Sorry, Fortnite.
Yeah, but Fortnite's that old reliable. I mean, there's no bigger gameplay loop than that one. Is go in there and be the last one standing. Like that's the biggest gameplay loop you're ever gonna find. But they find ways to bring you back in, to change things up, to enhance, to add.
And I'm about to spend $150 on a guitar, so for Fortnite.
We will. And we'll do it.
Wait till those drums come out. I'll buy the drums, man. I don't care. It's been...
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that have mixed feelings on Fortnite Festival, but we play it probably at least twice a week. So...
And again, you give us instruments. I think people have been wanting Rock Band to return. People have been wanting a lot of these simplistic things. People want an updated Rock Band. People want a new style Pokemon. You know what I'm saying? Like, again, I think you mentioned it. We gamers, we're really simple.
And
We're really
Helldivers
simple
reminds
folks.
us of Titanfall, one of the best times of our gaming lives ever.
Exactly. So again, give us what we want.
Give us what we want.
What we want.
Give me what I want. Give me what I want. Give me what I want.
It's not that hard, guys. But those are, again, our thoughts about Palworld. Have you guys checked it out, and what has been your experience thus far? We would definitely love to hear from you. If you would like to hear any of our other episodes about any of the other games that we have played here on this series, check the Linktree link in the show notes below. You'll find all the rest of our content. You'll also find our social media pages, the most important ones to keep up with being Instagram, TikTok, as well as our growing Discord page. If you maybe found us for the first time after meeting us at either Brick City Anime Festival or Stingray Con, welcome. Thank you so much for checking out this episode and for being part of this community. We hope to hear from you very, very soon. Next month, we are going to be at Collective Con. We're not hosting any panels or anything like that, but we will have a presence there talking about Bold Matsuri, which is coming back to Jacksonville later in this year. If you want to support the show, you can do that a couple of ways. One, you can head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Leave those 5-star reviews. It helps drive us up the charts. It's very, very helpful. You can also share the content. Tag us. Let us know you're listening. Most importantly, let other people know that you are listening. We greatly appreciate it. But if you feel like maybe going the extra mile in supporting us and joining a very special community, Eric will let you know how you can do that.
As with everything, with every free option, there is also a way you can do a little bit more. So for every like and comment, you're also able to support us directly through our Buzzsprout page with your funds. But for everything that you can do as well, like joining our Discord and joining the community, you could take those funds and join another community in the form of Patreon, where patrons like Stefan and Breyer are helping to support the show there, getting behind the scenes and early access to episodes like this one. So definitely make sure to check that out. But whichever you decide to do, we truly appreciate the support. This show has been going on for many years now, and we have a lot more planned. This year is going to be really exciting. I think we're taking it to the next level, and we cannot wait to see what 2024 has in store for us. With that being said, my name is Mr. Eric Almighty. That is my co-host, Phil the Filipino. And please don't forget, we release new episodes every Wednesday on the podcast with bonus content on platforms like TikTok. And all you got to do is wait for it.
So, I heard you're looking for a go-to source for entertainment.
Wait for it.
Gaming?
Wait for it.
Anime?
Plus Ultra!
Mr. Eric Almighty and Phil the Filipino? Yeah, they've got you covered. And all you gotta do is wait for it. This is the Wait For It podcast.